Welcome to the second part of Chapter 2, Understanding the Distinctions Among Research Methods. So we're going to talk about each of the four types, and we're going to start with quantitative, which would be on towards the objective end of the continuum, which is also towards the scientific end, right? That is also deductive. That's the style. Okay, so what is the focus? Quantitative research or statistical research focuses on measurement and on predicting behavior and attitudes and on research that is generalizable, meaning knowledge that can be applied to large groups of the population. There are some real strengths to quantitative research, and that includes identifying patterns and trying to establish cause and effect relationships, right? That certain kinds of attitudes cause certain kind of voting, right? Or that certain kinds of beliefs about, um, say, the food production system in the United States leads to certain kinds of purchasing of organic foods, for example, right? And the good thing about quantitative research is it often gives broadly based research that can be used for making sure that our policy making is actually supported by evidence, meaning that the laws we pass on the local, state, and national level, right, can hopefully be backed up with evidence that shows that this is a good approach. There are limitations, though, to quantitative, right? It tends to be oversimplifying very complex attitudes and complex sets of behaviors to isolates one thing, which is good. But then by doing that, we lose a lot of the context that it is specific to and a lot of the other factors that may be involved. It also tends to rely on self-reported data. So what are your attitudes? You may understand yourself in certain ways, but you act in ways that definitely don't reflect them. And I don't mean you, I mean us, all of humans. That's what we tend to do. Okay, qualitative research, right, would be somewhere in the middle of the continuum, right? And so a good step away from objective into intersubjective, right? And the focus here is on very in-depth, rich description. The data that we use tends to be focused on a lot of words, but it can also, like what people say, transcripts of interviews, but it can also use images and observations of behavior used from ethnographic fieldwork, right, from watching what people actually do and how they communicate in spaces. The strength of this include very detailed insights, right? I have done studies, for example, of clinics. I studied one for older people who had cancer specifically that used an interdisciplinary team of healthcare providers to take care of them. And that gave me very detailed look into how the team actually functioned in the clinic. And it puts a lot of emphasis on your participants instead of subjects. We have research participants in the middle of the continuum. And those, their voices tend to be a lot more evident and privileged in qualitative research than they are in quantitative research. There are limitations, though, right? It tends to be very context. It's not generalizable. So the team that I studied has a lot of practical implications, that study does, but it's not generalizable. I can't say this is how all healthcare teams work, or even the majority of them. It also is extremely time intensive to do that kind of ethnographic and qualitative interviewing kind of research. And it really depends on the particular research doing it, their interests, their experiences, and background. Our third approach is critical methods, which moves over to the much more subjective point of view on the continuum, over to the humanities perspective. And the focus is on analyzing symbolic communication, usually media, can be any kind of TV show or social media. Sometimes people do critical analyses of a specific recorded speech or a specific recorded set of interactions, but generally there are things that are produced, like a critical analysis of TV shows or of TikTok content, that kind of thing. The strength of this is that you get into a very deep analysis of the meanings that are generated and the ways in which power, social power, are implicated in there. Like, why are there or how, not really why, how are there a lot of representations on TikTok of certain kinds of belief systems? How do they work together? How are they individually different from different ones, right? The whole trad wife thing, how can we follow that trad life phenomenon, or a phenomenon focused on a particular health trend that's hot at that moment, right? And we can therefore, engage in critical thinking about societal norms. We're doing a deep dive on only one or a very small set of things, but that lets us look at much bigger issues in society and how they play out in this one text. The limitations, of course, is that this is very interpretive. This is very much a subjective point of view, and it could be valuable, but it might not be to your taste. It might not be one that you particularly value, and it's not definitive, meaning it doesn't have the same kind of social science authority. It has a different authority based on the quality of the recording. quality of the ideas expressed and of the argument. Okay, creative methods, right, also very much down towards the humanistic, and they can be very experimental and extremely humanistic, or they can sort of edge back closer to the middle to the intersubjective meanings. Somewhere between those, maybe, right? So a step away from totally humanistic, but also not quite at intersubjectivity, because all filmmaking is done with a very specific perspective, right? You make choices about what to record, about what to include, about what kind of experts to enlist, about what kind of people to ask for interviews, about what kinds of footage to include. So the focus is on creating basically art, right? Different kinds of performance, different kinds of filmmaking or digital storytelling. The strengths of this is it's multimodal, meaning you can do recordings, you can do podcasts, you can do digital stories, you can do still images, you can do moving images, film. There are just, really all no limits to how you can creatively construct aesthetic, right, or creative representations. These tend to capture fleeting and intimate experiences, like recordings of things that are happening live, and they tend to get a lot at things that are not repeatable, right? Particular moments in time at a festival or recording at a political event or something else that is happening in the community. The limitations is that these are ephemeral, meaning that they are often very temporary. They often don't last, right, or are inaccessible after a while. And they are very much subjective, sometimes getting more, trying to be more systematic, closer to journalism, right, with a more balanced point of view, but they really do reflect more subjective points of view. Finally, I want to advocate, or at least the official stance in this class is that quantitative, qualitative, critical, and creative methods are all important and useful. It depends what your question is. And with the diversity of methods, we have a richer and more comprehensive field of research and an understanding of a particular issue that we are interested in learning more about.